Everybody would turn on the mics. Button needs to be up. Okay. Time being 1:30, we'll call the March 25th, 2026 Stanislaus and Tuolumne Rivers Groundwater Basin Association Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We have a quorum. So far end there, we've got Mike Pitcock from the city of Waterford. Next to him, Brad Clinkenbeard is the alternate for city of Oakdale is here. Sitting in for Jeff Roberts. Darren Smallin from the city of Riverbank is here. Next to him, we have Christy McKinnon with Stanislaus County and Jesse Franco to my left from Modesto Irrigation District. I am Eric Thorburn from Oakdale Irrigation District, and to my right is Timothy Barahona from the city of Modesto. Moving right into business from the public. At this time, interested persons are welcome to introduce any topic within the agency's jurisdiction. Matters presented under this heading may be discussed, but no action will be taken by the agency at this meeting. It's not required. The speaker may provide their name and address. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Open up public comment. Anything that's not on the agenda. Seeing none in the room. Seeing no hands raised on the phone. We will move on to item 3. This is consideration of approval of the March 11th, 2026 meeting minutes. Assuming all the member agencies have had an opportunity to review those minutes, I'll entertain a motion before going out to public comment.
I motion to approve.
You. Brad, was you?
Second.
Any comments from the member agencies on the minutes? Okay, we'll open up to public. March 11th, meeting minutes. None in the room. See no hands raised on the phone. Bring it back to the committee for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 4. This is the water year 2025 annual report. Recommending approving that. So we got one comment letter. We did make some edits as a result of those comments. I wouldn't consider any of those to be substantive edits, but there were some red lines that were made. The red lines are online, and the final draft, clean draft, is also online. As noted on the agenda. Liz is on the phone if we have any questions about the annual report. Member agencies first. Comments, questions on the annual report? Okay. I'll entertain a motion before going to public comment.
I move to approve the water year 2025 annual report.
I'll second. Yeah. About to public comment now on the 2025 water year annual report. Yep. If you don't mind, well, would you mind just pushing the button on that microphone? It should turn green on the top. What do you do?
There.
Got it?
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
It's more of a question. I probably for Liz Elliott, I guess.
Sure, she's on the phone.
I was wondering, I've never seen any analysis of how or where the water comes that recharges our groundwater. I mean, it would be Vance Kennedy used to say you could trace it with isotopes, but I've never seen any work where people actually saw where the water came down. And I think for our groundwater use in our budgets and everything, it'd be nice to know where that water actually comes into our area and where it comes from. And that would be, I think, really helpful. But I don't know if it's possible to do.
Want to speak to that, Liz?
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So as part of the report, we work with our teaming partner and Dominic on to update the data model for the current water budget. As part of, I'm sorry, I'm hearing.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Liz.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that any better?
Yeah, I think so. It's just going in and out.
Yeah, I'm hearing my back. So.
Yeah, it's still going in and out.
I think at least those of us on the line are getting.
Yeah,
They're
mute
muted.
your mics on here. You might be hearing her over the TV. Is that better?
I think so. No.
Try again, Liz.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can still hear. Yeah, I can still hear feedback.
It's never been a problem.
No. Wait. I think it's.
I'm going to try muting us, and then. Well, no, because everybody won't be able to hear that way.
Well, I think I can't hear it now. So whatever just changed may have helped. I don't know. Dominic, is that might be helpful?
Okay.
Seem fixed on your end?
I hear it well.
Yeah.
Okay. So backing up. Well, thanks for the question, first of all. So basically, as part of the annual report, Dominic Woodard and Curran, our teaming partner, updates the model for that current water year for the water budgets. As part of the model update, he's looking at sources of groundwater recharge. Now, you're right, we've never done an isotope analysis, so we don't know groundwater ages and the exact pathways that each molecule of water takes to recharge the aquifer. But the model does take into account recharge from the foothills, recharge from adjoining subbasins, as well as recharge from the surface, which is from precipitation, irrigation return flow, and also seepage from canals. I don't know if that answers your question, but no, we have not done, there hasn't been a detailed isotopic analysis for groundwater flow pathways. This is a regional model that's used to build, water budgets. And so these recharge sources are taken into account. And if there's anything that you want to add, Dominic, please chime in here.
I think that covers it on my end.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Louis Burketta with Alice Burketta Farming.
We have one on the side of the microphone.
Yeah, great, Bob.
Should be good. It's showing. It's picking you up.
So, anyway, so I was wondering, Dom's Cal water diversions, were those incorporated into the GWUMP?
No, all the updates for the Dry Creek riparian diversions have occurred as part of this annual report cycle, which were downloaded post the adoption of the GWUMP.
So they aren't incorporated into the GWUMP, is that correct?
Riparian diversions off of Dry Creek are not in the GWUMP.
Great. So essentially there is some incomplete data with the GWUMP. You're not accounting for Dry Creek diversions. That's right. Correct, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
do you remember what the number was, Dominic? It was like 5,000 acre feet, something like that?
So dry creek diversions usually range anywhere from a couple hundred acre feet to about 5,000 acre feet. The long-term average annual is about 23 to 2,500 acre feet for the region.
Okay. And the first 5 years of cutback was, what was it? I think it was 16%. No, it was 33%. And then there was a reduction because OID redistributed the amount of water we had, right, in the first 5 years. But long term, we're talking about a cutback according to that data without accounting for the 5,000 acre feet or whatever it was, 2,500 acre feet long term average. It was something like 60 to the tune of 60,000 acre feet. Is that right?
That's correct. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can pull them up if that's helpful.
But order of magnitude.
Yes,
order of magnitude. That's about right. So
yes, that's correct.
Going forward, we'll continue to improve that data, which we talked about during the groundwater use management program, and that's one of the improvements we'll make, right? But it's really not going to impact long term the first 5 years. It wouldn't impact their reduction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I guess the comment that I'd really like to drive home is that, as we can see that there's incomplete data with the GWUP that needs to be updated, specifically for non-district east, not accounting for other issues included in the model. And I appreciate Eric, acknowledging it and showing us that it's only 5,000 acre feet, but that only for an area who is facing demand management is a big only. And this is my concern with the model and how data collection occurred and, the timing of the GWUP. So I just like to make a note to the board that this is blatantly evident that there is missing data in the model. Thank you.
Yes, Louis Burketta. To expand on the missing data, Trinitas, which is now Pomona, Canadian investors, I provided the well log data, and throughout the district, I gathered their pumping data, and they're in District East, right across from my ranch. So from 2013, before that, they were solely pumping groundwater. 2013, they got annexed. So they were pumping like 25, 30 CFS, or using 25, 30 CFS of OID water, which is great. I anticipated them using all surface water. So up to 2014, that's what they were using. Their management team told me that they had a great attorney, also worked for OID, and they were foregoing using surface water to transfer it to their South Delta property in Westlands. And I could never figure that out. How come you're using groundwater when you have surface water available? So here comes 2025. They upgraded their system, put in a new rotating screen on the main. They jump all the way up to 70 CFS, according to OID. So that's 40 CFS more they're using, of surface water, which is great. The problem is they were using that much more groundwater for all that time. And that's like 79 acre feet a day. And to exclude that data from this model is criminal. So, OID, through their policies and management of groundwater in district, is culpable for this too. Extremely culpable, and they purposely excluded it. I provided it to Eric, to Liz. She admits the groundwater is going up. Groundwater went up. I have been tested by professionals every year for the last 15 years. It went up from 1.9 acre feet or 1.9 feet to 35 feet last fall. This Friday, we're getting them rechecked. And to say that the groundwater is continuing to decline is an out and out false lie. And you have a political narrative here that's untrue. These engineers, they can lose their license for excluding information it on a public document, and that's what they've done.
Thank you for your comment. We'll have some discussion and presentation on water levels here. Next topic. Anybody else? All right. Bring it back to the committee for a vote. All those in favor of approving the water year 2025 annual report signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. All right, item number 5 is a discussion on the 2025 groundwater level analysis. And Liz, you're going to take the lead on this, right?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, I'll share my screen now. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'll get started. So like Eric said, the presentation I have for you today is on the groundwater levels that were measured in the fall of 2025. So I'm going to first just kind of give you a summary of this monitoring event and then go through some draft results. This is the first monitoring event of 2 events for water year 2026. So this is not part of the annual report. This is the next GSP monitoring event after water year 2025. So the draft results that I'm going to go through include a summary of the sustainable management criteria analysis. I'm going to show you some hydrographs, and I'm also going to end with kind of a summary of the data and give you a perspective. So to start, the fall 2025 GSP monitoring event is the 8th GSP monitoring event since the GSP was submitted in January of 2022. During this event, groundwater elevations were measured in early to mid-November in 59 representative monitoring wells in the monitoring network for both chronic lowering of groundwater levels and interconnected surface water. 2 of the wells were not measured because they had casing obstructions, and this has been the case for several years now. And since the fall event, we have found replacement wells for these. So starting during the spring 2026 event, which took place just a couple weeks ago, both Wood and Quisenberry have been removed, and the replacement wells have been added, and they were replaced with New Nagel and Lemcool. And I just want to say thanks to Jesse and MID for helping to find these replacement wells. So just wanted to remind you of what the definition of undesirable results is from the GSP. For chronic lowering of groundwater levels, an undesirable result will occur when at least 33% of representative monitoring wells exceed the minimum threshold for a principal aquifer in 3 consecutive fall monitoring events. For interconnected surface water, an undesirable result will occur on one of the rivers when 33% to 50% of the representative monitoring wells for that river exceed the MT in 3 consecutive fall events. It's 33% on the Stanislaus and Tuolumne rivers and 50% on the San Joaquin. And so the important takeaway here is that the definition of undesirable results is based on exceedances during the fall monitoring event. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today from fall 2025 event. In the fall 2025 event, this is a summary of the minimum threshold exceedances. On the left-hand side is a table that summarizes the MT exceedances for the chronic lowering of water level monitoring network, and on the right, the interconnected surface water monitoring network. Starting on the left for chronic lowering of water levels, I've shown for each principal aquifer the number of wells that had water levels above the minimum threshold, the number of wells below the minimum threshold, and then the percentage of wells that had water levels that were below the minimum thresholds. These are the exceedances. So for the western upper principal aquifer and the western lower principal aquifer, water levels at all of the wells were above the minimum thresholds. In the eastern principal aquifer, we had water levels at 24 wells above the minimum threshold, water levels at 13 wells below which was a 35% minimum threshold exceedance. So this exceeds that 33% threshold, which is why I've highlighted it pink, whereas the other two aquifers, Western Lower and Western Upper, are above that, below that 33% threshold and are highlighted green. So we've exceeded the 33% threshold for minimum threshold exceedances in the Eastern Principal Aquifer in the fall. For interconnected surface water, along the San Joaquin River, both wells had water levels above the minimum threshold, 0%. Along the Stanislaus, 3 of the 8 wells had water levels that were below the minimum threshold, and that's a 38% MT exceedance, so that's slightly above the 33% threshold, which is why that's highlighted pink. And then along the Tuolumne, 1 of the 9 wells that were measured had water levels below the minimum threshold, and that's 11%. So again, we're exceeding the threshold here in both the Eastern Principal Aquifer and along the Stanislaus River. And to give you a broader perspective, this table summarizes the percentage of MT exceedances for each monitoring event that's occurred since the GSP was submitted. I've only highlighted the fall events here, and there are 4 fall events, as you can see, because these are the events that potentially count towards undesirable results. And you can see that in the first fall event that occurred in fall of 2022, we exceeded that threshold in the Eastern Principal Aquifer and along each of the rivers. Since then, the last 2 fall events, fall 2023 and fall 2024, we were below the threshold for all of the aquifers, and along all 3 rivers. But in the fall of 2025, we have, like I showed you on the previous slide, we are above the 33% threshold in the Eastern Principal Aquifer and above the 33% threshold along the Stanislaus River. So this does not mean that we are in undesirable results because of the fall 2025 monitoring event. It just means that this is the first fall event that could potentially lead to undesirable results. We would need 2 more consecutive fall events where we had exceedances above the 33% threshold in the Eastern Principal Aquifer and the Stanislaus River. But this is something that we need to keep close watch on, because we certainly don't want, we do not want to march towards undesirable results. Interim milestones, excuse me. So interim milestones were defined below the minimum thresholds in the GSP for wells that were in the Oakdale Irrigation District Management Area, as well as the non-District East Management Area. And there are, in the Chronic Lowering of Water Levels Monitoring Network, there are a total of 14 wells with interim milestones. In the fall of 2025, there was 1 well, MW10, that had a groundwater level that was barely below its IM. It was below by 0.05 of a feet, so barely below. And there was 1 well, Quisenberry, which we had discussed earlier, that has an IM, but there was no measurement because of a casing obstruction. And this hydrograph that I'm showing you on the right-hand side is for that monitoring well, MW10, with a slight IM exceedance. This was a monitoring well that was constructed in late 2020 or early 2021 with Prop 68 grant funding from DWR. And so we just have a few years of monitoring data since basically the spring of 2021. For interconnected surface water, there are 5 wells with interim milestones. And in the fall of 2025, water levels at each of those were above the IM. And again, that well, Quisenberry, was also in the monitoring network for interconnected surface water. And there was no measurement because of the casing obstruction. So now I'm going to take you through a series of maps and hydrographs for each of the principal aquifers. This map is for the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. The wells that are in the monitoring network are shown on this map, and they're colored either green or red. Green means the water level was above the minimum threshold, and red means that we're below. And so for this Western Upper Principal Aquifer, all the dots are green because water levels are above the minimum threshold. In fact, most of the wells had water levels that were above the measurable objective. And this is similar to the previous event, which was spring 2025, where we did not have any MT exceedances. I'm going to show you a couple of hydrographs from the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. This is for Caton 69. This is in the very western region of the aquifer. You can see that in this, this well has water level measurements from early 1991 through the fall of 2025. And groundwater levels have been relatively stable through time. We did have a dip in groundwater elevations in the fall of 2022. And since then, it's recovered and it's been relatively stable over the last 3 years. The next well is further east within this aquifer, Western Upper Principal Aquifer. In the fall of 2025, the water level is above the measurable objective. And you can also see through time it's relatively stable. There was a slight shift change down in about 2015 during the drought. But over the last few years, groundwater levels have been relatively stable since a decline that occurred in early 2023. Moving on to the Western Lower Principal Aquifer. There are 5 wells in this monitoring network, and in the fall of 2025, water levels at all the wells were above the minimum threshold. And water levels at most of the wells were above the measurable objective. And this is similar to the previous monitoring event in the spring of 2025, where we did not have any MT exceedances. A couple of hydrographs from the Western Lower Principal Aquifer. The first one is from a monitoring well installed within the city of Modesto, kind of in the eastern part of the aquifer. In the fall of 2025, water levels are above the measurable objective. And you can see that, seasonal fluctuations for a few years that were much greater, much more pronounced than they have been the last couple of years. And this is most likely due to less pumping occurring in the winter months. I'm sorry, pumping during irrigation season, not the winter months. The next hydrograph is for another monitoring well, MW2D. In the fall of 2025, the water level is above the minimum threshold just barely, and it's been above the minimum threshold in both 2024 and 2025. But we're seeing a slightly sharper seasonal decline in 2025 than we have seen in 2024. And this may be due to the fact that water year 2025 was a below normal year. And this is the map for the Eastern Principal Aquifer. Again, the green dots are wells with water levels above the minimum threshold. The red dots are wells with water levels below the minimum threshold. And during the fall event, 35% of the wells had water levels that were below the MT. And this counting is 24 wells with water levels above the MT, 13 below. And you can see in general, the red dots occur in the eastern part of the aquifer, except for one well on the very western edge of the aquifer, near the edge of the Corcoran clay. 14 wells have interim milestones, and like I said before, there's one well, MW10, which is located, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right here in the eastern part of the aquifer that had a slight, had water levels that were slightly below the slight IM exceedance. And compared to the spring 2025, the previous event, there were 10 wells in the spring. So we had 3 more wells this event where water levels were below the minimum threshold. And I'll take you through a few hydrographs from this aquifer. Starting in the west of this western part of this aquifer, this is a hydrograph for Clarabelle 206. In the fall of 2025, water levels are above the minimum threshold. And you can see through time that there's kind of a shift in water levels that occurred around 2014, 2015 during that very serious drought that we had. And since then have been relatively stable. We are seeing seasonal fluctuations, but in general, relatively stable since 2014, 2015 and above the minimum threshold. moving further east, this is Bentley OID 2. The water level in fall 2025 is very slightly below the minimum threshold. You can see there's an overall declining trend since water levels were first measured in this well in early 2005. But over the last few years, the water levels have been relatively stable with some slight seasonal variation. And then moving further to the east, this is a hydrograph for the Paul Cell 2 OID 12 well. Water levels in the fall of 2025 are below the minimum threshold. What we're seeing is that the eastern wells have the highest rates of water level declines. We do see that in water year 2024 and 2025, as reported in the annual report, water levels were pretty stable. But in the fall, we see a drop again. And again, this is probably due to the below normal year that we had. And here are hydrographs for several wells in the easternmost part of the eastern principal aquifer. This includes hydrographs for the 2 Paul Cell wells with the long history of measurement from 2005 through fall 2025. And also from 3 monitoring wells, MW7, 8, and 10. And these were wells that were constructed in late 2020, early 2021. So we only have a few years of measurements from those wells. But what we can see when we have these all on the same chart, that the trends at these wells, at the Paul Cell wells and the monitoring wells, are pretty consistent. Between spring 2021, which is when the first measurements were taken at these 3 monitoring wells, to fall 2025, water levels at these 5 wells declined between 12 and 17 feet. We're seeing that there's more variability in the water levels in the monitoring wells than the Paul Cell wells. And this is most likely because the screened intervals in the monitoring wells are much shorter, whereas the Paul Cell wells have much longer screens. And so these variations kind of get muted or drowned out. But trends are very similar. Moving on to the interconnected surface water monitoring network. This map shows that we have no exceedances of the minimum threshold along the San Joaquin River. There are 3 wells along the Stanislaus River where we had water levels below the minimum threshold, and these are concentrated in sort of the mid subbasin. And then we had 1 well along the Tuolumne River with water levels below the minimum threshold, also kind of mid subbasin. This is a hydrograph for Canfield 90, which is along the San Joaquin River. We see that water levels in the fall 2025 increased since the spring. Water levels are slightly above the measurable objective and have been above the minimum threshold since the mid-90s. Along the Stanislaus River is a hydrograph for Birnbaum OID 3. In fall 2025, we're slightly below the minimum threshold. We're seeing very similar seasonal fluctuations over the last 3 years. And you can see kind of a sort of slight declining trend over time from kind of early 2005 to present. And finally, lateral 195 along the Tuolumne River. In the fall of 2025, the water level is above the minimum threshold. We've had relatively stable water levels at this well since the fall of 2023. Most of the measurements throughout time have been above the minimum threshold, except for that, looks like that 1 measurement in late 2022. So in summary, what does this mean? Well, the fall event occurs right after irrigation season has finished, and in theory is trying to catch the low groundwater elevations of the year. And so we're seeing seasonal fluctuations in water levels throughout most of the subbasin, which is what we would expect. But after a below normal year, water year 2025, Groundwater level declines in the easternmost subbasin were greater than they have been in a couple of years. We saw some relative stability during water years 2024 and 2025 in the easternmost subbasin, but we're seeing declines again in fall 2025. We did not have any MT exceedances in the western principal aquifers, the western upper above the Corcoran or the western lower below the Corcoran. Within the eastern principal aquifer and the Stanislaus River, we had MT exceedances above the threshold, but they do not meet the 3-year standard for undesirable results because in each of those, it was just the first fall event. There's one interim milestone exceedance at MW10, very, very slightly below the IM in the easternmost subbasin, and this is the first ever IM exceedance that we've seen. And finally, a broader perspective. After a below normal hydrologic year, MT exceedances crossed the 33% threshold for the first time since fall 2022 in 3 years in the eastern principal aquifer and along the Stanislaus River. In 2025, the GSA developed a groundwater use management program and a well mitigation plan and adopted both of these in January of this year. In 2025, there were no reports to DWR of dry wells. And according to the groundwater use management program, the non-district east management area will be developing an action plan in 2026 and will implement management actions by January 2027. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Liz. So we'll open up for comments from the member agencies. Please.
Yeah, I have a question, Liz.
I'll open it to public.
Okay.
Liz, this is Mike with City Waterford. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Hey, can you send me an email of the hydrograph for MW6S in our community? And I'd like to see it with the MOs, MTs, and IMs, so I kind of get a feel for what's going on in our community.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Liz from the member agency? No? Okay.
Liz, I sent you some well completion reports that are public information on Trinitas wells and in District East, directly across from my property. It's called the Crabtree Ranch. Did you evaluate their level too?
Well, they're not part of our monitoring network. So
of course not. Yeah, so I gave you good information. OID has an easement there. They're easily accessible, and they show a 105-foot drop in groundwater since development. And then your monitoring well, as I told you previously, is in a place where there's no known groundwater. It's east of there about a mile. Is it MT8 or is that well 8?
MW8 maybe?
MW8, yeah. So anyway, your report's incomplete by far, and it looks to me that you are purposely excluding information in this report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Liz. Just kind of question on the inner surface waters there as they reach up into the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority. I mean, I think OID is the only one that sits on both GSAs.
The county does as well. Yeah.
Have you guys been, I mean, are they seeing something similar from their reporting as well in that area or along the Stanislaus River, or is that something just this group is picking up? And I'm curious about that.
I haven't completed my review of the draft report, so I would be able to discuss that question. Yeah, I think that's a very good question.
Yeah, I'll take a look. I haven't looked specifically at these interconnected surface water wells there. I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, just kind of curious, and then I'll be able to, as it go further down the river, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be part of the GST update. We'll have to coordinate with both basins. So that'll happen over this next year. So we'll definitely be looking at that either way, but good questions. Thank you. Comments? Anybody else here in the room? Okay. Anybody online? All right. Bring it back to the committee. Liz, I've got a couple comments, last questions. So in the eastern principal aquifer, there was the graph of the eastern wells. You go back to that. I don't have a slide number here.
This one?
There we go. Yeah. So these are all the east wells that we have. So there's that MW8.
Yep.
There. That's the well that Mr. Burketta was referring to, I believe, right? So that is in the orange. So it's one of the bottom three there. So pretty much similar trends all in that area, huh? Okay. And then so this plot goes back to 2005. So there was a comment in a meeting earlier today, and I kind of sparked my curiosity. It was kind of in reference to groundwater pumping in essentially the west. And so the pumping that occurs in the west, whatever you pump in the west affects the east. And it was like a fishbowl comment. And we're in a fishbowl. So if you're pumping on the west, then you're affecting the east. So if you look at this and you see the drop from 2005 to 2026, and we're looking at a rough order of magnitude there of what 150 down to 70, so 80 feet drop during that time. And then if we go back to some of those wells on the other side of the basin there, so probably the Caton's a pretty good example, I guess. Yeah, there you go. So over that same time period, 2006, they were right around 30, I don't know, 32, 33. And now they're right around, well, it might be a little higher, 30, 33, 34. And now they're right around 32 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of disproves that theory, right? In your opinion, or I mean, or am I seeing something different, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, pumping in the western part of the subbasin is not affecting water levels in the easternmost part of the subbasin. And we can see that clearly from the hydrographs as well as the contour maps.
And that's the upper. I guess the lower, we have one in the lower that's that long. I guess we don't. Not in the ones that you showed here. But I was thinking maybe the lower, do we need to look at the lower and see if there's any kind of difference there?
Yeah, we don't have long histories of water levels in the lower. It's most of the wells that we have we have about 5-6 years of data, so we don't have that long history that we do in the western upper.
Yeah, but sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, even during that time period, I mean the change there, even on that well right there, you're looking at 43 down to 36 or something, and during that same time, the non-district east went down. I don't know. Let's see. Go back to 2021. 2021 looks like it went down from about 85 down to 75. So 10-foot drop during that same time, essentially, something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I just wanted to see if there was any kind of trend that could prove that theory or anything. But
yeah, and it's more than a fishbowl because we have input and output throughout the subbasin. It's not a static system.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? We got public comments. I can go back out to the public. Yeah.
Good now.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Eric, thank you for the compliment, but I was specifically referring to the city of Oakdale and Riverbank. And, it is a fishbowl. I mean, it's undeniable. The city of Oakdale pumps 9,000 acre feet. I'm right on the edge. I had to replace my dry well, my domestic well, dropped 65 feet. So there is a correlated effect, and it's undeniable. I'd like to ask Liz, I said, were you instructed not to include the data on in District East, specifically the Trinitas well reports that I gave you, well completion reports?
No, I was not. The reason why it's not included is because it's not a representative monitoring well in our monitoring network.
I can't think of a more representative wells there. I ran several of them dry. They're the single biggest pumper up to 2024 on the east side. The single biggest one. And to ignore that information from my mind, but Hey, thank you for your response.
Thank you.
That's the one that MW8's right next to, right? Yeah, okay, thank you.
More?
Sure. Come on.
Bill Fogarty. I'm not trying to minimize what the non-district east is overpowered. But I do have a question about, I brought up earlier, about water flows downhill. And just because the wells on the west side aren't decreasing their levels, the non-district east is pumping more, but that water would maybe stay up at higher in the east if the west wasn't pumping as much. I think that's kind of the fishbowl analogy, is because we don't have any data that shows where the water is coming to replenish the different parts of our aquifer. So that's why I really think that needs to be addressed somehow. And I think the East, they're most of the responsibility, but I don't think it's maybe as a cut and dry deal as everybody's making it out.
You have any thoughts on that, Liz?
Well, I do think what we're seeing in the east is sort of a regional drawdown. We're not seeing the full cone of depression because we don't have coverage throughout the easternmost subbasin. But it's similar to what you see in the Turlock subbasin, but it's not as big as that cone of depression in the Turlock subbasin. I mean, it's the same thing that's happening. It's overpumping that's caused depression over time. And we're seeing that. We're seeing in the Paul Cell well, for example, this decline of about 80 feet, 70 feet over a period of about 20 years. And we're seeing that the trends in the wells in the easternmost part of the subbasin all have similar patterns. And we're not seeing that in other parts of the aquifer. And yes, it's true, it's a subbasin, there's connection. But there's certainly, there's overpumping that's been happening historically in the eastern subbasin that's causing these measured water levels to decline.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this. Or TAC, I think one of the hard parts is really visualizing this and understanding. If you're not doing this every day, just looking at this, picture in time, but not really seeing how it evolved through time. I'm hoping we can do a better job of somehow thinking of how we can present that. And one of the ways we talked about was contours and trying to provide, what the contours look like and the movement of groundwater look like prior to all that development in the non-district east and what it looks like now. There's a lot of different pathways and paths of travel and directions it's moving that it never moved prior to that development. And generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, the water in the basin should be flowing from the same way as the rivers, from the east to the southwest, essentially. So when it starts deviating from those paths, and you've got some pumping in certain areas that are preventing that from occurring like it naturally would. But we did talk about that. I think it's a valid point. I think we need to do a better job of trying to show people that and illustrate that. But we're working on. That's one of the things we can do during GSP. Right?
Yeah, I think we have the contour maps that are in the annual report, and it's hard to visualize over time how those contours change and what those contours mean. But if you look at the contours, if the gradients are not as steep in the east as they would be naturally without pumping, right? There's kind of a flat gradient in the east because of the pumping that's happening. Without any pumping in the subbasin, you would see much steeper gradient in the east, like you're saying, Eric. So yes, natural groundwater flow is from east to west. That is occurring, but the gradients in the eastern subbasin are quite flat because of the pumping that's happening.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on Mr. McKenna's comment about, if I think a couple meetings ago, the GSA talked about adding some additional monitoring wells. If the public has monitoring wells, is there an SOP or a policy in place from the GSA where people can include those instead of going through the expense of punching a new well, even though it's a monitoring well. And if not, I think something in writing to clarify for people would be beneficial.
Yeah, just basically we've asked people to reach out to us if they're willing to provide that information. I think what we need is well construction logs, understand what aquifer it's in, and then kind of an understanding of the pumping characteristics, time periods that you're pumping out of the well, because when we monitor them, we don't want to have pumping occurring at that time, to have artificial drawdown, not see that consistency from year to year. But if there are wells that you or anyone else here or on the phone or anybody else be willing to provide that data and allow us to go monitor those long term, we'd be more than happy to review them and look at them. So there's no formal procedure, and I don't think we necessarily need it. But if they just reach out to us, then we'll definitely engage in that conversation. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else from the public on the fall 2025 groundwater? No. Got a hand up on the phone. Mr. Payne. You are currently muted. Whoops. Showing that you're muted on your side, I think. Still muted on your end. I can see a mute sign there. Oh, you dropped your hand. Okay. Well, you can reach out to me if you want. We can talk about whatever we wanted to talk about after the meeting if you'd like to, if we can't make it work here. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, sure.
Is there any way that the raw data can be delivered to the public quicker than this? If it was collected in November and now here it is almost April. And then also, if this data could be more easily accessible on the GSA website.
So I think this is all in the portal, right, Liz?
Yeah, this is all publicly available information as soon as it's uploaded to the portal. So for example, the spring 2026 event that took place just a couple of weeks ago, the GSA uploaded that data to DWR's Sigma portal last week, I think. So you can go online and see that data now. It does take us a little while to do this analysis, and we have that data, and we're actually going to be starting that analysis soon for the spring event. And as soon as that's done, we'll share it with you. But you can go to the Sigma portal at any time and look at the current data that's there.
Yeah. So if you go to,
I was told that before, and I tried to do that. Okay, and it's beyond me.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, if it's our data, it'd be easier for all of us to access it at our website rather than to enter the
portal
realm of
either
website.
Yeah, either way, we'd have to basically have our own portal and manage our own portal. There's a cost to that. I could show you after the meeting, or I could even do something. We could have our consultant or me go online during one of the meetings, have a discussion, and show you where to get it on the portal. If you want to do some kind of walkthrough, we're open to doing that too. So kind of, hey, here's this well, and match it up and show you where that's at. I don't have a problem doing that at some point. Yeah, I think it'd be easier than trying to put all that information on our website. With the portal already being set up the way it is, it's supposed to be for public access. And then you can see any well you want. If you want to go to some other basin, you could even see that. I think if you saw it walk through, if we walked through it once or twice, and you probably get a hang of it, and then you know how to do it. But it is a little bit. It's not the most intuitive website.
Thank you.
So I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that too. It's not intuitive, but
a little clunky.
Once you do it a couple times, you get used to it. But it is all there, and I'd be happy to help you find it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. All right. Any other public comment? Committee comments before we move on? Okay. That was item 5. Moving on to item number 6. This was requested at the March 11th meeting, I guess it was, to be on this agenda. So this is a Stanislaus County update. on third-party review, the groundwater model, and then action plan development in the non-district east and coordination with the non-district west and city of Bank. Christy, you want
Yeah, so thanks to the GSA for.
You're right. Don't worry. You're good.
I have a presentation. Anyways,
No, I don't have your presentation.
Okay.
Sorry.
let's give an overview. We provided this presentation for our Water Advisory Committee this morning. I just want to say thanks to the GSA for giving us this opportunity to provide clarification on some of the information that's been circulating around the county since the adoption of the groundwater use management program. So the update is to focus on the groundwater use management program non-district east action plan and next steps. So just a reminder that the whole reason why we're doing this is because we committed to it with the adoption of the revised Modesto GSP. The member agencies committed to development of a demand management program by January 31st, 2026, which was completed as promised, in addition to implementation of the program by January 31st, 2027.
Yeah, I got it in mind.
The groundwater use management program framework was to allocate the sustainable yield to the management areas in the Modesto subbasin. We used a subbasin wide equitable approach with an opportunity for collaborative resource sharing of surplus water from the Oakdale Irrigation District Management Area. The allocation was proportional based on the total land area. We call that the overlying area, and that method was chosen because it's simple, it accounts for de minimis municipal users and also for development or the recovery of developed supply. This method gives more water to areas that need it most while maintaining respect for water rights. Oh, great. So just a couple more notes. The GSA did receive stakeholder feedback, which was reviewed and included in the final groundwater use management program. That included a non-district east technical evaluation of proposed groundwater allocation and demand management framework by GSA from EKI, submitted on behalf of some of the non-district east landowners. The feedback largely included requests to develop a subbasin-wide program with implementation by management area to include all of the developed supply, to distribute allocations based on total instead of only irrigated area, and to exclude urban areas and to evaluate opportunities for collaborative resource sharing. The EKI technical.
What slide are you on? This one?
Oh, sorry, we're gonna go to the next slide. Okay, here we go. So
I can't see where you're at. Is this the right slide?
Oh no, we're gonna go back to the map. To the map.
There we go. Thank you. I just got on the line, so I'm trying to follow.
Okay.
Let me know.
Thank you. So we've seen this picture various times. It shows the member agencies. We have the 7 member agencies of the GSA in addition to Tuolumne County. These agencies act as caretakers or stewards of the groundwater to manage pumping based on the allocations that were issued. The stewards are responsible for distributing allocations to beneficial users within their management area, and each steward is responsible for a groundwater use management program oversight within its area of jurisdiction. Stanislaus County oversees the out-of-district unincorporated lands in the county, known as the white areas, and Stanislaus County is the non-district east and non-district west management agency for those portions of the subbasin. It's very important to note that the city of Riverbank is also within the non-district west. However, the city is the management area steward for itself and not managed under county authority. So there's been some talk about the city of Riverbank and Stanislaus County co-managing the non-district west, when in fact we're different political entities, and Stanislaus County does not oversee what happens with respect to groundwater management in the city of Riverbank and vice versa. I don't know, Darren, if you have anything to add.
Well, I know the mayor sent a letter out a couple months ago, February 11th, I think it was, and it was shared to the board in our last meeting. And Mr. Lyons shared that with us, and she wanted to make sure that she was involved in any, or the city was involved in any discussion going forward as far as the non-district west is concerned. And if that's possible.
That makes sense. We've been working to build an ad hoc group for development of the non-district east action plan, and we've invited Mr. Ratto to participate on behalf of the non-district west, and Stacy Call, city council person for the city of Riverbank, to serve that purpose. So I hope that that makes things a little easier to navigate as we move forward. Excellent. Okay, so what are the county's next steps for the groundwater use management program? The county as the steward is now responsible for development of the non-district east action plan. So why is an action plan required for the non-district east? As we know, there's significant overdraft and declining water levels in the non-district east. That number is 48,900 acre feet a year with long-term developed water redistribution under the collaborative approach. The allocation is 45% of the historical use with the collaborative management approach. This action, I'm sorry? Sorry, say something. The action plan will give specific information and direction on how the county will work with the landowners to initiate reductions, achieve targets, and meet timelines. The Board of Supervisors directs the Department of Environmental Resources to hire a third-party consultant to review both the groundwater use management program and the EKI technical studies in order to provide a recommendation. The intent of that action is to review all the available information as part of development of the action plan in order to make sure we are obtaining confidence from our landowners, to build consensus between the other management areas, to build trust, and to make sure that everybody is included as we move forward with these next steps. So the department sent a request for proposal out this week. Best case, we're hoping to have a consulting firm on board in June. We understand we don't have very much time to get the action plan done, but we do know that we'll have the steps that we need in order to implement the program so we can meet our demand reduction targets and timelines as we promised when we approved the groundwater use management program. With that said, we know we'll have additional work to complete, and we'll complete that work as we move forward in order to get the tools that we need to make these programs successful and give our landowners options for compliance. Our ad hoc work group, we have 4, possibly 5 volunteers from the non-district east. It's a very good spread of farmers. We've got representation from our cattle ranchers, and then also, like we said, we invited representation from the non-district west and the city council person from the city of Riverbank. In addition, Supervisor Withrow and Buck Condit were appointed to lead and help coordinate these efforts, and we hope to have our first ad hoc work group meeting in the second half, or probably in late April. Next slide. So, okay, what are the next steps for the non-district west with respect to this groundwater use and management program? So we already discussed that the county-wide areas in the city of Riverbank are managed separately. Water levels are relatively stable in these other management areas and therefore do not require action plans, in addition to not having the significant overdraft that we have in the non-district east. So what will our other management areas be doing? The non-district west, Oakdale Irrigation District, and Modesto Irrigation District management areas will be responsible to continue to monitor, report, and collaborate with the GSA member agencies. Next slide. Okay, so the next steps for the non-district east action plan are to focus on getting those requests in to begin the ad hoc work group, to get that consultant on board to help us with development of the plan, The Department of Environmental Resources is responsible for obtaining board direction for any future policy decisions and action plan approval. We need to bring the plan to our board for approval before October 31st, 2026, so that we can meet our deadline to present it to the GSA for approval by November 1st, 2026. And then the action plan is to be implemented by January 31st, 2027. And the STRGBA GSA will continue to function and provide oversight basin-wide to ensure that the management areas are remaining in good faith for compliance with the plan. And if we fall out of compliance with our action plan, the GSA has indicated that they will take similar steps that the state would with respect to requiring well registrations and charging groundwater extraction fees to get the management areas back into good standing. So,
That's it.
are there any questions or thoughts or comments? I'd be happy to take them now.
Want to go to the member agencies first? Nothing more? Okay, we'll go out to public.
Hi, good afternoon. Wrangler Wheeler, farmer in West Meadow, and some in non-district West as well. I have more questions than I do kind of a statement to make. Let's see. You mentioned early on, trying to go down kind of your slides as you did. You mentioned the term resource sharing as part of your plan. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that exactly?
Absolutely. So part of the groundwater use management program found that instead of the Oakdale Irrigation District management area being in deficit, like the other management areas, there was a surplus into the tune of something like 10,400 acre feet. So that's water that the Oakdale Irrigation District management area can do with what they choose. So they were agreeable to spreading that water proportionally to help make the other management areas whole and reduce the impacts that might be associated with demand reduction. So that was spread over the other management areas, and it brought something like an extra 10% that doesn't have to be reduced in order to help the non-district east management area. It also contributed to making the irrigation district and the non-district west management areas whole. The non-district west still has a deficit of 11%, but because water levels are relatively stable, we don't see those large overdrafts. And we're going to be working to updating our model and getting better data. We think that it's not necessary to impose an action plan on non-district levels.
Gotcha. Okay. So relatively, that'd be the idea of potentially taking your two areas you get flipped over, which would be non-district west and non-district east, and kind of moving resource back and forth to become more sustainable as a whole of what you guys are overseeing potentially.
I would say no. I don't believe, based on the information that I have, that is a possibility because I believe those areas are hydraulically disconnected.
So it's mostly just a mathematical credit, right? So nobody's actually like sharing water per se, but when you look at the math, then let's say, you know, the Oakdale Irrigation District has an X amount of credit based on the amount of extra water they have. They can share that credit mathematically, so it reduces the need to reduce, but physically the east isn't getting any more water. So there's still that, at least it basically helps from like just from like your paperwork standpoint, you know, when you really look at the numbers, it says, okay, you know, just to kind of make it a little bit more manageable, slowly, you know, get into the reduction side of things. It's mostly just to help that happen.
Gotcha. And then up to this point, I know you guys have worked pretty hand in hand with the non-district east, being that they do kind of have relatively the larger issue at hand. Does Census County feel that the representation of non-district west has been equal in any kind of sense?
Good question. I would have to say that we are prioritizing to build an action plan for the non-district east. So that is going to be a priority with respect to the Department of Environmental Resources. The county does understand that the non-district west wants to be involved, and that's why we've asked for representation to come to the table. in our ad hoc group so that the non-district West perspective can be heard and that they're not left in the dark. But the non-district West doesn't need an action plan. So I would say that up to this point, I'm not going to say as to like who has received more attention or support, but moving forward, it will be the non-district East because we have significant work to accomplish in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, no, that's extremely understandable, and that's I brought that last month with Rob with the idea of different management actions for different management areas, and I really appreciate you guys going through to clarify that this meeting too. Thank you very much on that. And then that kind of answers my question too of why we're looking at a one representative from non-district West versus potentially 4 to 5 from non-district East. That also again kind of answers that question. My last one, do we have any kind of estimated cost of what this additional third-party consultant studies going to cost the county yet?
We do not. I put together a very comprehensive request for proposal to develop the action plan, which included a component for the third party to review the 2 competing studies and develop a recommendation as one unit. So I asked for everything so that we could put all of the tools on the tables for our landowners and our stakeholders and our county staff and officials to consider so we could decide what we can and what we're willing to do in order to get this work done and provide the most and best options for our landowners in order to provide flexibility and incentives to meet our demand reduction targets while still focusing on developing and implementing the projects because that's what we would like to see happen in order to get us to achieve our sustainability goals.
Okay, thank you for clarification. I appreciate it.
One thing to clarify from OID too, we committed to the first 5 years of redistribution of that surplus water. Anyway, in that first 5 years, but not long term. So we'll have to talk about that moving forward, what we want to do there's a lot of options on the table. One is not redistributing that at all. Obviously. But the first 5 years we committed to doing that just to try and help people invest in projects and get better data, all those sorts of things, and ease into the reductions. So this 48.9 acre feet per year with long-term developed water redistribution in your slide ends up, I think, being closer to like 60, which is what I was talking about earlier. So just so everybody understands,
Mr. Thornburg, are you guys considering shipping that extra surplus water out of the basin, like the 50,000 acre feet water sale that you have on the agenda now?
No, we've never transferred groundwater, and I have not heard of any intention to do so. In fact, there's an ordinance that would prevent us from doing that in outside of Stanislaus County. It doesn't appear that the ordinance applies to in district though, or in the basin. So, I mean, we're not selling it now, but we're helping redistribute it. If you don't want it to be redistributed, then you want to cut back more, then we're happy to hear those comments.
Well, I think you guys have plenty of resources to make the basin whole. If you take down some of the cement walls and the barriers. And it's pretty evident by your proposed water sale of 50,000 acre feet out of basin down to San Luis Delta Mendota Water Authority, which is going to hurt the county's tax base and all the management areas as a whole in the Modesto subbasin and the eastern San Joaquin groundwater subbasin. No, I think OID is a great district. I would like to see them work as hard as keeping water here for projects here as they do as exporting it.
Yep, I agree. And we have 25,000 acre feet allotted for the outer district landowners first, and above and beyond the 50 that is not being used currently and has not been used for several years. If the out of district landowners were able to use all of that 25,000 instead of only half of it up to this point, then we could consider not doing up to the 50 and doing less. So they're definitely, from my perspective, our board has provided us direction to try and keep as much local as possible. We need a place to put it though.
That's where there's a lot of flexibility, off-stream storage and flexibility in your contract cement walls. Because you've had people drop out of those walls. They've left $200,000 on the table because you had absolutely no capacity to deliver. Another grower that I know left $300,000 on the table because of his inadequate. He was ramping up his delivery system, but I mean, you should be able to get immediate credit for that instead of put them further behind and financially. So I think there's, it's a good program overall, but you need more flexibility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Bill Fogarty, non-district E, cattle rancher, and I have irrigated ground. I haven't heard too much, except today, Christie said it, and then we have topic number 7, MID, about fee structure and pumping restrictions. How is that going to be determined? I mean, the ad hoc committee, I don't think we have the power to determine that. Is this board going to be doing it, or is the board of supervisors?
So as part of our action plan development, the Department of Environmental Resources has started the work to obtain an economic consulting firm who can help us with coming up with some options for funding the work that we do as a management area steward in the Modesto subbasin. So I'm very intrigued to hear Jesse's thoughts and the thoughts of the member agencies to see how we may further collaborate with the GSA to come up with a fee schedule or a funding structure, because we're going to need to know specifically what is included and what is not included in order to complete the work that we need to do to implement our demand management program. Great question.
Will that be determined by January 31st, 2027?
We will not have our fee structure. We most likely won't have our fee implementation mechanism in place by then, but we're working towards that. We want to get that taken care of as soon as possible, because that's going to help us get the tools that we need to do what we need to do. It's a process. It's going to take probably at least a year. But then again, I'm still interested to hear the thoughts of Jesse and MID and our other member agencies, because things may change.
So this is a fluid thing again. Yeah,
it's
probably
uncharted territory, right?
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. Couple questions for you. I understood there was a non-district east reach out meeting. Can you talk to us about that? Like how many people were in attendance, and was it more than just the 10 normal people that show up to MID, OID, STRGBA meeting? What was the public there?
It was a town hall meeting targeted to the non-district east to let them know what the next steps are. We wanted to go over that we approved the groundwater use management program, and then specifically the additional direction provided by the Board of Supervisors, and get just some feedback from the non-district east and the public that attended. I'd say there was probably maybe 30 people, not counting the county staff and county support that was also attending the meeting. There was a lot of questions about the next steps and recommendations on how to move forward, and things that we should also be focusing on as we move forward with completing this work, like how to further develop and implement projects and things like that. So it was very informal.
I still have concern with the county needing to hire a separate consultant. I would be interested to know how the county's reaction if OID hired a consultant, if they didn't like what they saw, and if MID and then Riverbank and Modesto, and we got 8 consultants that you guys are paid for one validated consultant, and it's like the consultant battle or something like that. I don't mean any offense to this, but in the private enterprise right now, especially in farming, we're doing everything we can as far as cost reduction goes. And I don't feel like it's getting translated from the governmental end, where, we're spending money and spending money and spending money. And so it would be really nice if the government, the local governments were thinking about cost reduction strategies as much as spending more money. just for what it's worth, because obviously the farming community here within our county, state, and country is hurting as we continue to deal with inflated input costs and stuff. So just something to always keep in your back of your mind, please. So thank you.
Afternoon. I have just one quick suggestion. Today I attended the WAC meeting, and the Turlock plan, I think could be a real model to help you all, just as an idea. I have just a few comments. I kind of agree with Mr. Ratto. I'm surprised that hiring a third-party contractor has come up. You've spent 3 years, 7 different agencies, 4 cities, 2 irrigation districts in the county. You retain the services of 2 well-known and well-respected water engineers, Todd Groundwater, Woodward and Curran. You've had multiple workshops, accepted multiple public comments, met with multiple parties. You spent in excess of $1.5 million of ratepayer money. That report was accepted by the boards of all 7 agencies, and then accepted again by the 7 member agency called STRGBA. So it makes me want to ask, who asked for the 3rd report? What is the cost? I mean, you may not have the exact number, but Christy, do you have an idea or a range? Okay. STRGBA report had a full vetting by the public, 7 agency staff, versus a private report that was claimed to cost in the tens of thousands of dollars and has not been vetted by the public means. The STRGBA report represents 250,000 residents, 5,000 farmers, versus a private report representing maybe a half a dozen of private individuals. I really do believe that Riverbank, Del Rio, and the non-district West farmers have not been included to the extent they should have been. I'm happy to hear that you're planning to include them more. But to bring the temperature down, I would urge the county to hold a joint meeting of Riverbank, Del Rio, the non-district West Aggies. Not these small, hand-picked ag hoc committees. The perception is the county is tipping the scale in favor of the non-district East. Comments like from the city of Riverbank to the city of Riverbank. We didn't have room to include interested parties. We needed to keep the group small. February 10th, letter from the city to the county, from the mayor. The city nor I received communication regarding some of the outline requests, which suggest the non-district West absorb pumping reductions. I mean, those are the kind of perceptions that have led to maybe the temperature rising. I hope that gets resolved. I would like to know who selected the Riverbank representative, because I don't think the Riverbank City Council knew about it. It appears that maybe the Riverbank staff didn't know about it. Question of Liz. Riverbank is a complete extractor. And if you remove the non-district West Aggies, whose flood irrigation offsets the Riverbank extraction, what's the city of Riverbank going to do? Will there be forced curtailments? Will there be limited growth? I haven't quite understood how that's going to work to separate the extractors in the non-district West and the people whose flood irrigation offsets the extraction. So city of Riverbank, I would be very cautious about agreeing to that division. If you exclude Riverbank as extractors, that has got to help, I would think, Liz, maybe Liz can comment, the non-district West Haggis, who primarily had surface water. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
When does the GSA expect farmers in the non-district east to dry out 18 to 20% of their ground?
So that's, well, I'm not saying 18 to 20%, but that's what the action plan is going
No,
to.
when's the date that you want to drop the axe?
So the groundwater use management program says that over the first 5 years of implementation, which begins January 31st, 2027, the non-district east has to reduce pumping by 16,000 acre feet over the first 5 year period. The action plan that we're going to develop is going to tell us how we're going to do that.
So it's not going to be take out one of every 5 trees.
There's
January 17th.
There's a lot of ways of going about it. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pull out that much ground. It could be, there's other ways to generate water, right? More out of district water could be taken. There could be other projects that were developed, but they need to pump that much less water. However, they figure out how to do that. It's up to them. Does that make more sense? But during the first 5 years, which the first 5 year period, it will start January.
So on January 2027, you have to reduce your pumping 18 to 20%. Let's just use a number that, it might change. Okay.
Yeah.
But do you have to reduce your pumping by 18 to 20% in the growing year of 2027?
So the implementation starts in 27 and it's over 5 years. That puts you between 27 and 2032, correct, to do the full reduction?
No, it's each year that much needs to be reduced.
16,000.
Huh? Yeah, 16,000 every year. Yep. That's average annual, based on the average annual.
How are you going to account for surface water use for people that use surface water and not district use?
So those are things that we put together in our request for proposals. So we asked our consultant team, who we will be selecting ultimately, to put together a groundwater accounting and management platform, so we can account with common data and methodologies across our management areas for the groundwater that we use and the groundwater that we don't use, and also for additional sources of surface water, and also a demand reduction portfolio, which will give us additional tools to consider. Do we want to build an incentivized fallowing program? Do we want to build a multi-benefit land repurposing program? Are we going to have opt-in program for non-irrigated parcels if they want to participate? Are we going to have incentives for using surface water use and or potentially credits and private trails? Like all of those things we're going to take a look at. We're going to bring that to the table and we're going to decide what we want to use, in addition to finding strategies and paths forward for further development and implementation of projects, the projects we have in the GSP, and also perhaps we have some more incentives for one of our recharge projects or other strategies that we can think of. So all of those things we want to bring to the table so we can have a full set of tools moving forward. And the whole point of that is to give the landowners options and flexibility to decide what's best for you to achieve these goals.
Thank you.
So it'll be determined by the action plan, which is what the county is going to get a consultant on board for, and start talking to the group out there and figure out what they want to do. The more things you do, the more money it costs, right?
Let's just get back.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2027,
yep,
are we going to be required to reduce our pumping 20%?
It's 33% minus the redistribution water, so that's 16,000 acre foot plus or minus. Yes, starting in 2027, again in 2028, again in 2029, again in 2030. That first 5 year block, each one of those years, you'll be required to pump that much less. Yes. That answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to thank the county for hiring and thank the Board of Supervisors for hiring a third-party consultant to look at this data. Because I think at the end of the day, all of us just want reliable, accurate data. You know, many of us in non-district east know that there's going to be some sort of balance, right? But earlier in the meeting, we just saw that Dom at Woodward and Kern just found 5,000 acre feet on average via Dry Creek. You know, and if non-district east is facing a 50,000 acre foot a year, roughly, overdraft, that represents 10% less reduction in demand management. So I'd really like to applaud the county for hiring or looking for a third-party consultant, because that just shows that the model has data gaps, just like the one that Dom had found, and that the GWMP was actually assessed with these data gaps. And I think we're just headed in the right direction. So I'd like to thank the board and the county and the board of supervisors.
Anybody else?
Possibly is answer the one question about the if you remove, you know, the riverbank is there. And we offset flood irrigation. And if you say there's two separate areas, how's that going to work? You know, what is riverbank? They're a separate sub-management area. I mean, I would think if you subtract flood irrigation, the non-district west aggies, and they're 100% extractors, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah, but you're extracting and you're growing a crop.
No,
And
no.
so that water's not recharging.
City of Riverbank. City of Riverbank is 100% extractors. And a lot of people in non-district west are flood irrigators.
Yeah, but if you're using, the crop is using that ground, that, take that, not all of it, but most of it.
No, but I'm saying there's got to be an impact to Riverbank.
From a supply reliance.
I'm just curious what Liz would have to say. If you've got positive results over here, negative results here, and now you're going to separate them. Just make one better and one worse.
Yeah, we're not proposing to separate them though. They're still the same management area. They're just being managed independently in the same management area is what I think what Christy was saying, right?
Well, there's no allocation that has been provided to each separate entity, and there's no need for an action plan right now. So say that conditions change in the non-district west, and that needs to be further evaluated. I believe that will be taken back to the GSA level to decide on how best to.
Well, and in the groundwater use management program, the cities were essentially allocated what they are using. So there was essentially an allocation program, and they can't, if they continue to grow, they can't continue to use more water because of that growth is what it was. So that's how it was accounted for in that plan. But it's all one management area, and all that use is accounted for in that management area.
The same thing equitable. It's not exactly correct, because as you take ag out of production, you get the credit for the lack of water there. So I don't know if you can say growth is going to have to be held to the same pumping standards in the cities.
As long as a cumulative
yes.
pumping does not grow,
Yeah.
does not get bigger than the city's fine growth. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Scribbles.
Oh, good afternoon. I wanted to have you elaborate a little bit on the third party review. And I know this is not your decision, it's the board of supervisors' decision, so any disagreement we may have is not personal. But can you explain what your goal is there to do? Is why don't you try to explain what your goal is?
So the third party, the intent to have the third party review is to get all of the information that we have available in order to build the best action plan that we can. The intent is not to dissect the groundwater use management program and to find things that are wrong with it. The intent is to look at it and see if there's anything additional that might need to be addressed. Perhaps there's easily obtainable data that we could consider incorporating into our action plan. The intent is to build consensus and trust and confidence in this action plan that we're developing. We're not trying to do anything shady, but we want to be able to look at all of the information, provide sound recommendations in order to ensure that we have the most equitable, efficient action plan that we can moving forward. We're making decisions based on existing data. And if we can have better data to make better decisions that are going to affect our landowners and our community and our economy, then that's what we want to do. It's just an extra step to be more protective, and in my opinion, to do a better job with the resources that we do have. So it's a big decision.
Now, you mentioned something about EKI. Where are they involved in this right now?
Some non-district east landowners obtain EKI to provide a technical evaluation of the groundwater use management program. So that evaluation used different assumptions and came to different conclusions. There was various areas of concern. In my opinion, I think those areas were adequately addressed by the final revision of the groundwater use management program. There were concerns about double counting the historic data and the area for the city of Modesto, and the area for the city of Modesto was taken out.
All the cities for that matter, right?
All the cities for that matter. There was questions about extending the historical baseline, but Todd and Woodard and Current used the baseline that they did because the state wanted to see worst case conditions. That's what other subbasins are doing. Off the top of my head, the other specific concerns, but I do feel confident I think that they were adequately addressed. So this third party consultant is just a step to not dissect like both of the plans, but to look at them and use the information in them to resolve any remaining issues and build a viable action plan moving forward.
So are you guys considering using EKI as this third party?
No, because they're, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I'd ask you to do is that you would provide all the information going way back to the county's first, early 2000s into 2013. You guys did a report. You guys did an ordinance. There was a big study done at that time because you passed an ordinance that restricted new wells being put in because you recognized that they were destroying the aquifer and that any new wells going in would have to do an environmental impact. And so we're talking 2013 that was the county recognized that.
Yes.
And it was interesting. You go back and listen to that board meeting, today or yesterday, for example, in my case, and you listen to what the supervisor said. Bill O'Brien at that time was the supervisor for the east side. He said, we got to stop the extractions, the overdrafting immediately. That was in 2013. Today is 2026, 13 years later. And so, I think that the county, more so than any other GSA member, has had the advantage to do something to protect the welfare and safety and health of this community as far as the aquifer is concerned. And they have been asleep at the wheel because they've had all the evidence in front of them. In fact, it was a very interesting comment by what was the gentleman's name? He was mentioned earlier, the hydrologist, Vance Kennedy. During that meeting in public comment, one of the things he said was, I don't maybe I don't get it exactly right, but pretty close. He said this: if we wanted to, we could solve and figure out what this problem is in a week. It was overdraft. We've known from day one that this was an overdraft on the east side. Okay, it's causing the damage to the aquifer and causing a lot of problems to this whole community. You know, we have a decline in water quality. And I keep hearing about how much this is going to cost the economy in the Stanislaus County if we reduce the pumping on the east side. There's other programs, like Eric mentioned to the gentleman before, there's other programs, MIT just approved one. They can buy the surface water, they can get the surface water and continue their farming operations without destroying aquifer. So I would encourage the county to not drag their feet on it. They've been dragging their feet for as long as anybody's been paying attention. Let's just create another ad hoc committee. What does that do? Just waste more time. Without that would go back to 2013, for example. Terry Withrow tried to make the public feel assured. At that time, the public was outraged, by the way, about the water aquifer decline and the damage that was being done to individual people in all the GSA areas. They were outraged. Okay, and one of the promises was Terry Withrow promised, we're going to get all these experts in a room, they're going to solve the problem. That was a WAC committee. And actually, in that 2013 meeting that I'm referring to, they approved that to be the committee that would provide the solutions to the county to get this problem under control. And here we are, 2026, I'll remind you again, 2026, with more delays like what you're suggesting and more propaganda. And when you look at the chart up there in Paulsell Valley from 2005 to today, what has happened? What did that chart show? One thing that's very consistent and does not take a brain surgeon to figure out. I think Ronnie Millsap and Stevie Wonder could see that chart. And that is that it's continued to decline. So I want you to go back and tell your bosses, just like I'd expect Jesse to come back and tell the MID board if there was something important happened, that make sure that they put in policies in place to protect the aquifer for all of us, not trying to pull a few shenanigans for a few farmers on the east side. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Provost brought up a good point, but you failed to include in-district pumping within Oakdale Irrigation District. The city's management area in Modesto management area, 192,000 acre feet. So everybody knows that there's problems in different management areas. But I think, you guys have to be impartial on how you approach management actions. Because in every management area, there's good actors and bad actors. So, you're going to have to wade through the weeds, figure that out, and make it equitable. Thank you.
Okay, one more shot for public comment on item number 6. Okay, any comments from the committee before we move on?
Just one suggestion, Eric, Martha, for Chrissy, when in these future meetings with non-district west, non-district east, I know you do provide updates during committee update meetings, but it would be good to get just an update on when these meetings are going to occur. I think in the event that I'm able to attend, it would be good for us to attend, or maybe Eric as well, just to be part of these, these open discussions.
Yeah, I agree. In coordination, it's good to report back. Kind of like any other committee. If we do something we're not going to bring back to the board, then just discussing it. And it doesn't have to be on the agenda every time. We can do that under director's comments. Just a simple update would be good. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I went to a meeting yesterday, Self-Help Enterprises, and it was interesting. I talked to a number of people down there, and that was in Visalia. And they've been dealing with this problem for a long time. And it's interesting how everybody, where we are in this kind of journey, exactly. And it's the reactions here to the need to have projects and management actions in the non-district east here in our basin is they're typical and they're expected. So I mean, you kind of go through a stage of denial and then delay, question the data, question the model, point the finger elsewhere, deflect responsibility for pumping reductions, projects, and costs. Get as many costs that are out there for administration, for fees, for projects, for studies, all that stuff. Push those off as much as you can. But I was talking to one person in particular who has a lot of experience with it. And he said, it's kind of like an alcoholic dealing with alcoholism, and you can't really address the issue until you accept that you have an issue. And then once you accept that you have the issue, then you start working towards a solution. And I'm hoping that we're in that process of working towards a solution. I mean, Mike Tietze said it really well today too. He said, after going through this, you really need therapy. And then therapy is actually when you get to do something to address the problem. So I think it's a healthy discussion. Hopefully that we're moving forward. It's going to be painful, but and nobody wants to do this. But I think it's good that we're getting started, and I'm encouraged that we're having these discussions and moving forward now. So, okay, that's item number 6. Item number 7, Modesto Irrigation District resolution recommending and requesting the STRGBA GSA develop a budget for 5 years or more and establish a fee structure, including groundwater extraction fees necessary to fund such a budget. Jesse?
Sure. So last meeting, we talked about how on February 10th, the MID Board of Directors brought forth the resolution, actually approved this resolution. There was a unanimous decision, and so we've provided that as part of the packet. Rather than go through the majority of the resolution, I really want to highlight the last 3 items where it actually focuses on basically the main points. Be it resolved, the Board of Directors for the Modesto Irrigation District 1 recommends and requests that the STRGBA GSA immediately take all reasonable actions to develop a budget for 5 or more years and establish a fee structure, including groundwater extraction fees necessary to fund such a budget. 2, authorizes its STRGBA GSA representative to take all reasonable steps to advocate, encourage, and participate in the development of said budget and fee structure. And lastly, recommends and requests that the other STRGBA GSA members, including Oakdale Irrigation District, Stanislaus County, City of Modesto, City of Oakdale, City of Riverbank, City of Waterford, adopt similar resolutions. So that was the main points of the resolution. I think to give you some context is that I think first and foremost, thank you for providing updates on kind of where the county's at with respect to Christine, with respect to extraction fees and setting up the fees. That's helpful. That lets the other agencies know, the public know, kind of where the county is at with that effort. And then moving into just the GSAR committee that's here on the dais, we are faced with some very difficult decisions. When you start speaking about groundwater, it is vital. It's crucial. I think more than ever, we're starting to feel it. We're starting to hear the discussions, the passion behind it, the importance behind it, the financial impacts behind it, the livelihood that's behind it. The city depends on it. All these different things are converging into a major impact. We take back the rewind, maybe 2 years ago, this room probably wasn't as full as it is today. It just goes to show how important the decisions are that are coming to a head or at us. They're coming at us. And as we sit at this table, oftentimes we're at a place where we can only say what we're authorized to say. And what we're hearing from Modesto Irrigation District and our constituents is, what is MID, Board of Directors, what is your position? Make your position known and have your advocate, your GSA representative be able to advocate and state what that position is. And this is one of the first steps in that position is, what is MID's position from MID Board of Directors? And their position is, let's look at, we've got a commitment, but let's reinforce the commitment to establish extraction fees and looking at that, partnering with Stanislaus County, obviously, but putting this in motion in a tighter time frame. It's making sure that we've got the resources, you've got the authority, whether it's with these members of the GSA, to have that authority to speak up, to make your respective agencies there, what their position is to also be known and take also, the necessary steps to get there. And so part of that is, I think it's twofold, right? It's MID Board of Directors allowing, their GSA representative to be more active, be more vocal. When as Director Frobos, President Frobos said earlier, it's my responsibility to report back to our MID Board of Directors and let them know what the concerns are so that I can come back and say, this is our position. And so I think ultimately this is where this resolution is going, is that we are making a position known on behalf of MID that we see the importance of setting up fee structures, a budget, so that each GSA representative agencies know what their financial, I don't want to say burden, but what their financial responsibility is going to be, because ultimately we have to report that back. And so that's the position, that's the basically the main points of the resolution at this point. If you have any questions, do my best to answer them the best I can. And I know, we're coming into a budget, GSA budget, we've talked about it, Eric, we've talked about it, that the goal is to establish a budget. We've tried to be, I think more forthcoming, more detailed in our budgets, but now it's taking it from a 1 year to a 5 year, because we do anticipate some of these fees being, just as we went through on groundwater use management program, well mitigation program, those are pretty substantial fees that are being shouldered through each agency, and that could be increase once we bring in consultants to help us with these fees. The costs are going to increase. What does that look like for each agency, and is it fair for each agency? I think that's what we're trying to get to, is let's define it so that we can start planning accordingly.
Any comments or questions for Jesse from the agency is here?
So up till now, what is MID envisioning the groundwater extraction fees to cover?
At this point, I think it's looking at where they need it, right? It's really focusing on what are the management areas. It's focused there, so we know we've got a better idea of how this is going to work. I think that, and I get it. There's a lot to be mapped out. There's a lot of details to be worked out. I, for one, don't have all the answers, and I don't have all the answers into this question. Is what is the overall expectation? We realize it's going to be having some greater discussions to work out the plan. I know that sounds vague, but what's the time frame? What's county's time frame? What management areas are truly facing extraction fees, and what are the time frames, and what's the plan for each management area?
I do have some clarification. Are we talking about replacing how we currently fund the GSA, which is what, 1/7? Everyone pays an equal share. Are we talking about every agency obviously monitoring? The cities, we monitor how much we pump, and we have to report it to the state. Are we talking about the smaller cities when they're paying less because they're extracting less than a Modesto or Riverbank? They're pumping more. They're accepted to carry a heavy weight. And it's what level were we talking about going down to? Are we going down to the domestic well user on half-acre ranchette, or are we, how far are we going down with this well extraction? I need a little more clarification before I can take anything to my city council and ask them to take a position on this. I just don't really understand. We need to know to what level you want to do this and how we're going to do this.
I agree with Mike. I think at least the high level of having a 5-year budget's not the biggest issue here. Always having a further outlook is going to help at the individual level to budget. But without a proposal for what this actually looks like, it's hard to really entertain the idea to get back to it. Because at least as of right now, to Mike's point, we have an MOU that already stipulates how we divide up the funds and how we fund the GSA. And then on a fiscal year basis, each individual agency finds a way to come up with their share. So we're going to do our financial analysis to make sure we always can cover our 1/7, 1/8 share, depending on what it is, and so does everybody else here. So I think a little more clarification on what the vision is here would be very useful. And in terms of groundwater extraction fees, is the vision there mostly for it to follow this groundwater use management plan and being relative to the allocations that are presented there, or is it just going to be like a uniform fee? That would be something worth clarifying as well. So in short, I agree with Mike. I think, if you guys already had something, it'd be great if at a future meeting, maybe there was a presentation on it, or something that was put out, because this definitely takes some, you got to kick the can around a few times to make sure you iron out the details on this before anybody, I think, is comfortable going to their board.
Another question. Is there any thought or talk of the groundwater extraction fee going to help fund necessary infrastructure to advance projects in the non-district east? Is that part of any of those ideas?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to hear your comment.
Those are good questions. Not that I'm at a position to, I think, make a formal statement on that, but the focus is on our groundwater use management program. I think that was the intent, to focus the extraction fees on that, on where those allocations are currently set. And that's what we know currently. Let's focus on what we currently know and move from that direction. Are there opportunities? I think that's yet to be seen. It really depends on, I think it's at this point, we realize there's a lot of, we realize where the concerns are. We realize where the areas that are producing the negative impacts, what are the solutions? What are the potential solutions? How much is it going to cost, which has yet to be defined? And what are the fees that are necessary to support those types of projects? And all that still needs to be defined. I think this step is making a position of, we realize there's a need. I get it. There's a lot of details that need to be ironed out. Working with our board to provide some greater input and more detail of what the vision is behind this. I think that's understandable. But I think at this point, we'd have to certainly look at, bring a consultant on to provide us some guidance and what this is truly in.
I almost think it makes sense to see how the county action plan flushes out a little bit first, because it looks like there's some overlap, at least in the thinking here, and there was already plan to at least see it from their jurisdiction standpoint. I understand the sentiment, though, at least in terms of making sure everybody feels like they're represented, and that ultimately, from a financial standpoint and from an allocation standpoint, everything seems as fair as it can be. That's where the county has the toughest part here, because they represent so many different individuals. This was brought up in the WAC earlier, many of whom don't actually have board representation, which is why I at least generally understand why they want a third party, because they want to make sure that everybody feels they're being equally represented and that there's trust built there. But I would think that would probably be the first, I guess, iteration or version of saying this. And, I forget who brought it up. I think it was Mr. Lyons over here, but we've seen other aspects of this done as well in the Turlock Basin. So there's definitely some frameworks there, but I think we need to continue forward with where we're at right now. And we'll kind of see what comes out of the county action plan and what that looks like for an area that actually needs an action plan right now. And then from there, we can see how we expand it out if need, based on what the data shows at the time. That would just be my general thing.
What I'm hearing is two separate things, though. What I'm hearing is the non-district east has a duty to reduce pumping, and there might be some extraction fees associated with the non-district east to help offset fallowing land or something of that nature. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but that's what but what I'm hearing MID say is the whole GSA as a whole, the operational budget as a whole, needs to be covered by the extractors on a proportionate basis. Is that kind of what I'm hearing out of the resolution? It's more along the operational side of the GSA being developing a 5-year budget, not necessarily dealing with the non-district east and the overdraft.
No, I don't think that is the envision there, Mike. I think the envision is really to focus on, okay, let's groundwater use management program. Let's focus there. We realize that out of that, there's only certain management areas that are right now looking at truly at an extraction fee. There could be others, but currently as it stands, it seems like we've isolated where the area is. Now it's looking at, okay, county, what are you proposing? And how is this going to impact the other GSA agencies? Is it just going to be primarily focused on, is this fee structure, is it going to be sustainable even with that itself? Or is there going to be extended responsibility, financial responsibility, or request, I think, from the other agencies to help facilitate that? Does that make sense, Mike? Not quite.
That doesn't really what I'm hearing though, when I'm reading, it doesn't make sense. So what I'm hearing is that the non-district east is kind of the area that has the issues that need to be addressed in the county. It's going through a third-party process to try to identify how to do that. But when I read the actual resolution, it seemed like you wanted a 5-year budget for the GSA and forego the 1/7, 1/8 distribution of those fees based on pumping. And that's kind of what I took from that resolution. So I guess a little more clarity about what the intent of the resolution was would be important to me, so that I fully understand when I take it back to my council what they're voting for. Because right now I'm not clear enough to say, yeah, I would support this or not support this. I may support it, but I need more clarity.
Can you address that point though, Jesse? In terms of the MOU and the existing cost sharing agreements we have, is that something that I guess based on the way Mike's interpreting, and I don't necessarily disagree with his interpretation based on the way it reads, that it kind of sounds like the updated fee structure is almost sounding like it wants to replace the the existing MOU and cost sharing program we already have. Is that the
No, I don't. That wasn't. I don't think that was what was being envisioned at this point. I think what we have currently in place, the MOU works, the structure's in place. There are, I think, opportunities of flexibilities that we have to look at. The MOU, I think, with the way it reads, is if we have to start looking at, case in point, let's say we start looking at management areas and extraction fees beyond on District East or other areas are needed. That allows us a flexibility within the MOU, bring on a consultant to focus on that specific management area. What's not, would we all share in that cost, or would it be up to that management area? I think those are some of the things we probably have to sort out. And I agree, looking at this situation, I think there's scenarios that maybe not all truly captured in this resolution. I can report back to our board and figure out how we could provide some better detail and more context in what was the additional intent behind it.
I would think that also, I guess, with an extraction fee, at least based on the latest and greatest data right now, it would seem that if we found a mechanism for it, as it stands, it would currently impact non-district use. But it also kind of works both ways, right? If we ever had another management area that started becoming a bad actor, then it also sounds like at least the way it would be that it would apply the other way as well if the data ever shifted and showed that there's another area out of compliance now. Is that a correct understanding? Correct.
Hey,
So-
excuse me.
Yeah, I'll let you chime in just a second here. So I still have one comment to make, if you don't mind. So before we go out to public comment, so OID has not had a chance. I have not had a chance to go back to our board and get OID's perspective from our board. We all need to recognize, and I guess I'm reiterating some of the comments that have been made before. Any change to even our annual budget, any change to the MOU, the structure of the MOU. Any allocation requires that we all go back to our boards and councils and get approval and feedback, and ultimately come back and vote that way. We're not elected officials. We're representing our agencies. Also, another thing to think about is in our current MOU, there is the ability to proportionally disproportionately share in costs for special projects under the funding and voting percentages. Part of our MOU, it does allow us to do that currently. So if there's something that somebody benefits from, or multiple agencies, but not all of the member agencies benefit from, if they want to fund that independently, they can. So that we have that flexibility already, and maybe we utilize that in the interim while we continue to think about this fee structure and where we go with that. From my perspective, I'm concerned that one of the reasons we took the approach that we are currently taking with the management actions and the GWMP is that there are things that need to be done one place and not others, and that's why we split it into different management areas, because we knew there was going to be different things that need to be done in different areas, and the cost should be allocated as such for those activities. When you start, the structure we have currently is very simple. We all go to our boards, we say this is our share, we come back, we put it in the account, and we pay out what we need to administer everything, and get everything done that we need to get done. Our budget right now, looking at it, we have 1.1 that's with MID with our operating expenses, and then we have 600,000 with MID or City Modesto rather, for the annual report and GSP update. In normal years, that would be $430,000 less because we wouldn't have the GSP. That $430,000 is this year and next year, split in half. So we're pretty lean, actually. When you start doing things differently, we all of a sudden start billing by parcel, or we start looking at pumping. There's a lot of monitoring, there's a lot of administration. You start issuing all those bills, that costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of staff time to issue all of that. And then you've got to come up with structure. You're probably going to have to do, typically what you do is a study, and then you go out and you probably have to go through 218 process, depending on what kind of structure you had in place. All of that costs money just to get in place. So we were trying to avoid doing all that by taking the approach we took with the GWMP. Now, right now, with us all proportionally sharing in the cost, there's already some inequity in that the county is paying 1/7, depending, and Tuolumne County pays 1/8 in some of the things that they share with us on the annual report, the GSP, for example. But let's just talk about the 1/7 share. All of us, all the constituents and all the member agencies are part of the county. So we all pay towards the county share, and we all pay towards our share. So we're essentially subsidizing those that are not in any of our member agency service areas, as it is right now. But it's a small amount, and I think the additional burden, administration, all that kind of stuff, administrative burden, costs, that outweighs that inequity currently. I think once the GWMP is implemented, and over the next year, and the county decides what they end up wanting to do in the non-district east, and they figure out what the costs are, and they figure out what their fee structure is, then there will be an assessment set up where you will have another area, independent special area assessment for the non-district east, and maybe a different independent assessment for the non-district west. And we could talk about having shares of the county being the non-district east, non-district west, and all of our member agencies, and we can take care of that inequity. That's a pretty easy thing to do, I think. But I'm looking at the Eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin, for example. If you start creating a lot more work for this group, I'm doing a lot of work on my own that a lot of other people are not, because I'm chairing the group, right? I'm not going to be able to handle that extra workload. We're going to have to hire somebody. And if we hire somebody just in the Eastern San Joaquin basin for 1 year, I think the contract with that consultant is $325,000 a year, right off the top for that management. If you look at another example I had was this morning. So the non-district east, or the Eastern Turlock subbasin, just in groundwater extraction fees to implement the programs that they want to implement or are implemented right now. I think it's 103,000 acres off the top of my head. And just in the extraction fees they're collecting, they needed to collect and collected ultimately just under $10 million 1 year, $10 million. That's not even that doesn't include the base rate fees that they are assessing for the operations of that agency. That's the scope that we're talking about, and the increase in cost that we're talking about. If we started taking this type of approach, I think. So I think we need to think long and hard about how we want to address this. And I don't want to rush into something and then all of a sudden create this, monster. So it's something to think about.
The Turlock subbasin, that's a JPA.
Yeah. Additional to the eastern, where the Turlock East, East Turlock GSA, yep.
Dan, how, if the county is the management area steward, the GSA would move forward to get involved with the funding of the activities that happen within our management area?
Well, the GSA would get involved with the funding of it. I don't either. I disagree with that. That's why we took the approach that we took, because we're trying to keep those separate, right? So the GSA has activities that we need to get done. We have the annual report, we have the GSP, we have, other things we need to administer, even the well mitigation plan. We're doing that, basin wide. But again, with that, we talked about if we all of a sudden see that we're getting dry wells in one area or as a result of pumping in one area or whatever the case may be, we can come back and we can have, that area be responsible for funding the adequate proportionate share that they're responsible for. So we have the flexibility now. What I'm not proposing, and I without talking to our board would not be in favor of paying for projects in the non-district east.
Okay, so
We'll move forward. We've been doing projects for years, and that's why we're in surplus. So I don't think
well, that doesn't make sense to me.
that's my
That to be clear.
without talking to my board. That's my guess. So okay. Any other comments from the member agencies here? Okay.
Like there's a little more homework on this.
Yeah, it's something to think about for sure.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah.
Could you and Christie work out it looked like there was quizzical eyebrows on Christie's on your 5,000 acre feet reduction every year. No? And when you said that we had to reduce 5,000 acre feet pumping per year.
It was
16,000.
It was 16,000 each year in the first 5 years, and it goes up. That's 33% minus what was redistributed to the non-district east by OID. So the total is something like 60,000 acre feet. So it's like it would have been 20,000, then 40, and then 60, rough numbers in 5-year increments. So
there wasn't any quiz. Okay. I thought it was 49,000 that was overdrawn.
the 49 is if OID was allowing redistribution of water all the way through the end of that implementation period across all 15 years. OID is only committed to doing that the first 5 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Rango with their farmer within West. Thank you guys for making this an actual agenda item, not just an afterthought of our last meeting. I appreciate the time that we all really kind of open this can of worms because it is time to do so. We continue with fast approaching deadlines, and sometimes we don't really have the plan in place that we need. I'm sure that's it's felt not only across this board but across this room. I do want to reiterate the importance of achieving sustainability. I completely get the goal of this board and the importance of it. And honestly, I look around this room and I'm probably the youngest member here. And sustainability is for the future, not only farming, but the livelihood of our Central Valley. And I really appreciate all of your guys' time, everything we're doing here today and moving forward. But your position here, you guys all have a responsibility to not only your guys' ratepayers, but your taxpayers. Each one of you guys was sent here by your board to protect the interests of your guys' ratepayers. That's why you're sitting here on this board. And with that being said, I don't think that MID is approaching us with resolution 2026XX in the sense of copy and paste this and we want everyone to adopt it exactly. I just think they want you guys to keep in mind that you guys have a responsibility and a financial interest in what this is going to cost and how you're going to protect your ratepayers and your taxpayers. We sit here and we talk about studies that we don't know what they're going to cost. We talk about projects that we have no idea what they're going to cost. We talk about future endeavors and potential things. And Christy, thank you for bringing up good questions. I don't think I expected that. What are these extraction fees going to cover exactly? And you brought up a great point of clarification. I think this room is full of people who want nothing more than clarification. I'd rather have spent this afternoon in a tractor than in this room with you guys. But clarification is exactly the thing that we lack in this room, meeting after meeting. We do need more clarification on what these projects are going to cost, what moving forward costs look like over potentially a 5-year period, and how that cost is going to be shared. Are we all going to try to share that equally like we have been so far? And thank you, Eric, for bringing up a good point. I understand that Stanislaus County is the steward overall, but he's right. We all pay our county taxes, and we all do kind of subsidize the county's interests. So what does that look like moving forward when we talk about splitting up the cost? How do we make that equitable and fair? And I think Modesto's resolution of 2026 is a great way of moving forward of saying, hey, we're interested in protecting the financial impact to our ratepayers, which is a responsibility and a duty that all of you carry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wrangler, thank you for those comments. Those were part of the intent you asked, what was the, expected outcome, this resolution. Kind of Wrangler summed it up pretty well. And that is to make sure that the expenses that we're incurring as a GSA, that it's divided equally amongst all the ratepayers and the taxpayers, and that one group of taxpayers or ratepayers are not burdened by the responsibility or that was caused by someone else. And if you look around the state, this is not the first time this has been done. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's about 10 other GSAs that have already done this, already went through this process, and have developed a budget and a fee structure for, you know, who's more responsible for the management of the, if you will, the management of the basin. In other words, if you think of it in terms like this, we did not have any problem whatsoever. It would be very simple to fill out a few forms, do a few tests, and the cost wouldn't be that much. But then when you start having extreme decline in water, then the cost becomes way more expensive. And then you have certain people in Riverbank, Modesto, that live on the corner of First and L Street. They've never overdrafted at all. And so why should they be burdened with paying for the responsibility of somebody's clearly overdrafted and caused this problem? So again, there's 10 other GSAs in the state of California that have already done this. There's consultants that MID has available. I've talked with them that are going to actually talk to one yesterday. It's already done this, done one GSA. Eric, you're correct. It's cost money, but then you have to think about it in terms of the GSA is never going to go away. We're here for, I don't want to say eternity because nothing lasts forever, but we're here for the, you know, next 50 years probably GSA. So we're gonna have a budget for the next 50 years. So you have to think of this in long term. So yeah, maybe it might cost some upfront money to do this because it will. You're right. The study has to occur in order to make sure it's balanced. But you go back to, you know, let's go back to 2013. And the language that was being used then was mining water and mining more than your share. And that language has kind of been taken out, you know, now, and it was actually mentioned in that 213. I don't know, that 213 meeting, let's not use that language anymore. But the law was that you can't mine more than your share. If you're taking more than your share and it's affecting your neighbors in a negative way, you can't do that. And so, in a sense, that's kind of what this is about, is it's making sure that people that have taken more than their share, that it's not affecting somebody else that didn't take more than their share. And that's what a study produces. And it makes certain things that, you know, annual fees, that's just still divided by 7, because it doesn't matter whether we have a problem or we don't have a problem, we'd still be required to do that since STRGBA came into place, or STRGBA came into place. And so then it gets more into the things that are actual causes of, and that's where the money starts getting divided up. So that's what I would hope you would approach your representatives with, and we can reach out to some of them as well. Because I mean, a couple of them actually have already reached out to me that they want to make sure that their ratepayers, their taxpayers, are not being burdened with more than their fair share. All right, thanks.
Hi, so I'm Carolyn Newman. I'm with the Stanislaus County Taxpayer Association, and I was on the grand jury last year, and I'm on the Modesto Transit Sales Tax Commission. So nobody writes rules until there's a problem, and we've kicked the can down the road for this problem for 13 years. To take your comparison about the alcoholic, you've got 2 kids, and you've got all these kids, 7 kids, and they're all well behaved. And there's this one who's an alcoholic. And you're dedicating all this time and resources and everything to them, and then you're neglecting all the other ones because of that. Where do you balance it? How do you draw that line? That's my question, because I'm just a regular resident. I live in the city, Modesto and West Modesto. You know, I love living out here, but you know, a lot of the things people have said today, a lot of people that are just regular residents, they don't have time to come to these meetings and have these conversations and take the time to learn all this stuff. But I feel comfortable saying a lot of them feel like I do, where I want these questions answered. And that's why I think at least kicking these off with this resolution is a good start to start the conversation of how do we refine it now that we have an example problem. We need to write some rules to go with it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that I think the concepts there. I really liked your comments, Eric and Tim and Mike. I don't know if the cake's cooked enough to take out of the oven, but I don't want to see us get into a position where the cure is worse than the disease. And my experience with other sigmas down in South State, sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. If you have to take extraction fees and go out and monitor every well in this county, especially in the management areas that aren't impacted, you may spend more on doing that than what the fact is. So I like the concept. I think that at least when I sat in the MID meeting, I felt it was more of a concern about what is this going to cost our ratepayers. And I think that's the key thing. You guys want to do, what I also want to do, go back to your prospective boards. I just don't think it's quite ready yet. I think you're going to learn a lot. And again, I hate to keep bringing them up, but Turlock is so far ahead of your sub-basin. They've got some great plans in place. They're dealing with issues. They've had 30 years to deal with. I'd really try to look at their model. One little area, it's a little bit off subject, is our family are been in the cattle business for over 100 years. I contacted California Cattlemen's Association probably over a year ago, stimulated some letters to the county and the board about the dry land cattlemen. And in some sub-basins, in my opinion, dry land cattlemen got impacted when they shouldn't. So I would really encourage you, if you've got landowners like the dry land grazing cattlemen on the east side who are de minimis users of the underground water, you need to be cautious about hitting them with too many fees. I think you also need to protect their rights of someday, if they ever do want to use that water. I get concerned when you start to allocate other people's water rights that they're not using to someone that is using. So I would just be cautious there. I don't have a dog in that fight when it comes to, we don't own any cattle grazing ground on the east side, but I know a lot of great cattlemen over there that I hope that the county, it sounds like a few showed up, hope the California Cattlemen's Association reaches out to those cattlemen, tells them to be engaged, because I would hate to see them get hit with fees when they're not really using the groundwater at all. But I think it's too early to take this up.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just a quick comment. Way back in 2013, when this started, the guy that was running it was from the MID. And he looked at me and I, with our grazing ground, he says, "You don't have anything to worry about because you have so much ground over that you're not pumping, that water is yours and you're not using it. So you can put it on the little bit of ground that you do pump." Yeah, that didn't work out, did it? So that's why you got to be trying to get a unified voice on this thing.
It's yet to be seen, though, right? That's part of the action plan,
right?
And the development of the county. So it may work out that way. You never know. It's really, stay tuned and stay involved. Yeah.
Hey, there's been a lot of good comments there, and Equid ability has come up several times. And analogies, alcoholics. Every one of you guys are functioning alcoholics because y'all use groundwater. So, I mean, if you want to go down that road, every management area should be charged, assessed for groundwater extraction because there's projects that are needed in every management area, whether it's treatment plants, whatever it is. So, I mean, but like Bill Lyon said, to collect those fees is probably going to be monumental to get them halfway accurate, you know. So I don't know what the cost benefit is, but you know, rather than rubber stamping something that MID or any other agency throws at you, you guys that need to evaluate it, to spend a lot of time on it, and come up with a good, equitable plan. That's my opinion. Thank you. Bob Provost is buying drinks at the closest canteen. Fresh water, right? Yeah. Unfiltered sounds
Or take more.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right. We'll bring it back to the committee. I think we all need to go back to our respective boards and councils and think about that a little bit. Either way, we will be talking about our next annual budget here coming up in that June period, I think, anyway. So it's not too far away. So keep that in mind, and if we need to talk about it again between now and then, just let me know. We can add another item on the agenda to do so.
I would think the lowest lift, at least for a 5-year budget standpoint, that's probably the easiest thing on the resolutions. Maybe try to tackle it at first, at least and work within the existing MOU framework. So maybe that's something we can start kicking the can around and see what that looks like if we start projecting costs out 5 years and all that.
And some equitable options for splitting between the member agencies, because when we've got, as we move forward, selecting our funding option, so that it could be comprehensive.
Yeah.
Plan ahead, or to our
Yeah.
to a teen or groundwater.
Yeah, I think once we have those assessment areas in place, then we can do that. And at that point, maybe it makes sense. And I'm just spitballing here. Maybe it makes sense to look at how our structure is, and we could even look at service area or pumping impact or all those things, like we do in the Eastern San Joaquin. We've got kind of a formula that is based on both those things: population, pumping, area, and we come up with an assessment based on that. But it might be a little early for that, but it's something we need to keep thinking about. As far as the 5-year thing, we do in our current budget, we have that 5-year contract with Woodard and Curran and Todd.
Yeah, that's
so we do
for that specific one,
yeah.
I guess. Because I think we're going to talk about everything.
I know, and that so we did with that, and I think that our plan was really after this GSP update and after we get through that annual report, we go back and hopefully do that for another 5 years, right? With a potentially another consultant or the same consultant, depending on who gave us with the best proposal, right? And so, most responsive or responsible proposal, right? But the other items are all, it's kind of, it varies year to year. That's why it's hard to put that 5-year budget together with those other things, especially with all it is like, we're dealing with and all balls we're juggling right now. So
the city of Riverbank's working on the water rate setting now, so
yeah.
Yeah, we'll incorporate it.
All right, hey, we just finished first.
Overachiever.
We just finished ours. Okay. Moving on. Item number 8 is the next meeting. So our next regularly scheduled meeting will be April 8th at 1:30 via Zoom or here at person OID. We may, it's only 2 weeks. So knowing we met twice this month, depending on if anything comes up between now and then, if we have any time sensitive action items, then we'll hold that regular meeting. If nothing comes up, then we may cancel, being respectful of everybody's time. So don't be surprised if that happens. So might be our next meeting is in May. But we'll hold that April 8th date for now. Any comments, questions on that from the committee? Public comment on the next meeting? All right, thank you. Item number 9, committee comments and reports. Jesse?
No, good.
Christine?
So we have our final county drought and resiliency plan posted on our website. We were asking for any additional comments to be submitted to us by the end of the month. We're planning on taking that to our board for adoption, most likely in June. All of this information will be posted on our county website. It goes hand in hand with our well mitigation programs and the work that we're doing with our GSAs in our respective groundwater subbasins. So take a look at it if you have any questions. The details like a lot of short and long-term resources that are available to help our domestic well owners and state small water systems if they experience water outage, water quality, or other emergency events due to drought. So we're happy to report that that work is almost complete.
Good. Aaron? Brad? Mike? No? Okay, only have one thing. So now that I ran unopposed for the chair position, I'm going to be appointed in the committee. So I just want to keep things consistent with last year. Jeff had expressed a little bit of interest, but he also kind of mentioned that he wasn't sure what his plans were. I don't want to have him join and then mid-year have to replace him. So for consistency moving into this year, for the well mitigation plan, we're going to have a committee. We'll keep the same committee there. So the county's on that with MID and OID. And then we have the technical advisory planning group committee. That is me, that MID and City Modesto. So that's the plan right now to keep that consistent moving forward, and then we'll revisit it next year. Anybody else wants to jump in and join? Either way, the action items would come back to the board, and any reports on the well mitigation plan would come back, and we would be able to get updated or take action when needed. So comments, questions on that? Issues with that? No? Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you at the next meeting.